3 weeks ago, I lost my little dog. I had 3, now I have 2. And the first 8 years I was out here, it was just me and them 3. Didn't have much anything else, I just had them. And so now I can safely say that a third of my treasure is in heaven. I only lost a third of everything. I have 2 more. But I can safely say that I have no desire for anything in this world now at this point. I don't care about any of its things. I don't care about its women and its money. I don't care about any of it. None of it could come even close to the joy that I had with just me and my dogs as I lived out here and worked on computer games and made stories. I don't think it would be possible for me to be happier while in this world, and it was the best time of my life. The times ahead are not going to be as good. I know this. I've already come to accept this. People say, no, you don't know that. I know that. Okay. The world is dying, and I know what I'm called to do. I already know it isn't going to be better, and yet here I am. I'm still gonna stay. But before you can really get through this world, you have to ask yourself, where is your treasure located? Jesus said it in an interesting way. If you store it where it can't rot and where the moth can't get to, he's of course referring to heaven. What he's basically saying is, if what you truly love isn't in this world, then it has no control over you. It can't influence you. Satan himself can come to you in the desert and offer you all the kingdoms of the world and all of its splendor, and you can just say, no thanks. Because this world it's not real. It's the closest thing to real that we know, but it's not real. It doesn't last. Anything that doesn't last isn't really real. It's as real as a dream is. It's not real. Reality is where you exist forever. This is a strange time and a strange place. That's why anything that it offers you. Imagine if you were playing a computer game, Grand Theft Auto, some kind of virtual world kind of game. And don't get me wrong, some of these people, they can get really into these games, and so they actually do care about their character status, and they do care about how much money they have in these worlds. But for most of us, we wouldn't care, right? Wouldn't care how much money we had in that fake world, because it's a fake world. It doesn't mean anything. Didn't matter what car you had in Grand Theft Auto, didn't matter what your place was, didn't matter. Because it's just a game, and you're going to go away from it and go back to reality. Well, that's how we should be looking at this world. Because this world doesn't last, and when we're done, we're going to be going back to reality. Where is your treasure located? When you go through hard times, trying times, testing times, just hard times, where is your treasure located? It's been 20 years since my mom passed, but if I really try to start to remember my childhood and all that, I do remember how much treasure I had back then. I don't think about it actively. I don't know why I don't. Probably because it would cause me to be emotional. But I know that if I were to think about it, it's like I could go back if I wanted to. I don't. I guess I'm just saving it for later. I'm saving it for after I pass. I don't want to live there. So there's nothing wrong with visiting it, but I don't want to live back there. Because it'll make you discontent. It'll make you sad and make you think, look how sad my life is now in comparison, and that doesn't do any good. But my treasure in heaven, I remember my mom. She was a treasure. She's in heaven. My time with her and her mom, my grandma, it was a treasure in heaven. My childhood, at least up to middle school anyway, it was a treasure. But you see, even then, middle school, cruelty. Life started calling. This world started calling. The evils of this world pulled me out of that happy place I was in my childhood. So the same, these last 8 years with my dogs, it was a happy place. It was a stress-free place. Didn't have to worry about things like Mark of the Beast. Didn't have to worry about a controlling state or World War III or anything like this. Didn't have to worry about how I'm not going to be able to find food or even be able to pay for it if I could. Didn't have to worry about those things these last 8 years. Even in the background you hear helicopters. You would never hear helicopters out here. For 8 years, I mean, it would be very rare to ever see a helicopter, and here we are. Everything is changing. And so the last 8 years of happiness and peace, it was a nice break. It was a time to heal, but it sounds like it's back to work. Just as middle school pulled me out of the innocence of my childhood, so too it seems that losing my dogs is going to pull me out of the innocence of what I had the last 8 years. It's like we're allowed these seasons for a break, for a time to rest and a time to enjoy. But don't hold on to them and think they're going to last forever. They could end up leaving faster than you know it, and awkwardly one at a time, not all at once. And if you're like me and you've lived alone for a long time, and I moved out to the middle of nowhere. I love it when I call somebody else's home their whole life nowhere. It's so condescending. I moved from California to Kentucky 8 years ago, and I remember when I first came out here, I was pretty arrogant in terms of just how I was just shocked that they had internet. I was just shocked that they had electricity and power lines. I seriously was shocked. Like, I drove through nothing but forest for I don't know how long, driving up through Tennessee. So when I came out here in Kentucky, I was just amazed that they even had power lines. Really, I was. It's like, they have internet? I mean, because everything else, they still played music like it was the 80s and the 90s out here. And I was like, I time traveled. I left in 2013, and I felt like I time traveled back to 1989 or something. But, what the heck was I saying? Already getting old. Oh yeah, those 8 years. They were good years. But the season changes. Seems like there's one winter. For every 3 good months, 2, I don't really count summer, it's hot. For every spring and fall, there's also a winter. The last 8 years were great, and now it seems like the next 3.5 might not be. Or whenever my dogs pass, anyway. My childhood was great. Middle school and high school, not so much. And also Army, not so much. And then, actually, now that I think about it, I've had more bad years, I think, than good. Because it all ended really by middle school. But man, that was a great childhood, though. I do feel bad for people who never really had a good childhood. I really do. It's very unfortunate because I always think, man, I always have at least one good time in my life I can look back on and remember and think about things. Saturday morning cartoons, and when my dad would download, like, oh my gosh, Wing Commander 1, and I played Wing Commander 1 on a PC. It was like a Pentium 66 megahertz kind of thing, or a 133 when we finally upgraded. Oh man, Wing Commander 1. Playing that in the mornings on weekends. I never wanted to stop playing it. I just loved the world that it created. It was this whole other world, for a kid with a huge imagination. This was just the best. And my childhood was warm. I mean, Mom always loved me, and I knew it. And it was just warm. So it's a bad sign, just when I start to think that she's doing better, I see her start to leaking. And it's just another reminder to me, like I said, nothing in this world lasts. Your loved ones, those good times, times of innocence, they don't last. I'm not motivated by trying to be doom and gloom. I'm the voice of the future, okay? I'm future you, who's coming to tell you that, listen, the problem is we invest so much of ourselves in good times, and it's like there's nothing. There both is and isn't anything wrong with doing that. There isn't anything wrong with that because it's kind of like how we're wired to be, but there is because it's not like, because this is not the place. It's like I always said, I'm one of those sentimental people that I would try to make a home out of a crater in a battlefield, you know? Out of a crater in a battlefield. And, it's just not where home was meant to be built, you know? I guess what it is when you see loved ones ongoing, like when you have an older dog who's in their last year or two, when they're still here, but you know they're not going to be here much longer. I think what's you're watching the transition between the things that you love in this world be transferred into your savings account, so to speak, in heaven, to where they go to heaven. On one hand, it should be very freeing. They can never feel pain. All the horrific things that might come onto the world, they would never have to go through. I mean, we as a species really have lived pretty peacefully, pretty well in abundance for this last century, and spoiled is really the best way to put it. To leave now is actually probably the easiest way to go, because nothing stays the same forever. It's always changing back and forth. Like I said, the different seasons, winter, winter, spring, summer, fall, it's just always cycling. And we've had nothing but spring and summer, and we've had fall for a while. Fall is kind of like the season where winter's coming. It's gotten colder. It's not exactly freezing cold yet, but it's gotten colder. The leaves are falling off. All the signs are there that it's about to be winter again. And we've been in fall for a while. Really, all of the teens, and even the aughts, different characters around the world have used platforms like YouTube and so on to wake everyone else up as to things like the Illuminati, how a small group of people actually run the world through the systems they set up, through the banks that they own, like the Federal Reserve. We've been warned for decades, really even before people were still talking about this, like Bill Cooper, back in the 80s and 90s. You'd see him on those old VHS tape recordings, So even the 80s and 90s, people were talking about it. Who knows how much longer they were talking about it before then, but we've known for at least 20 to 40 years about the powers who run this world. And so to me, this has been like fall, the last 20 years. I'd say the 60s to the 80s and 90s was kind of like, I'd say from about the 40s to the 90s was like spring to summer, and then from 2000 to 2020, or from something after 2000, it was fall, and now we're starting to see little bits of snow. Even though it might still technically be fall, we all know what happens when the leaves are already gone and there's little bits of snow coming down. We all know what's ahead of us the next 3 months. It's probably the reason why so many people are searching about subjects like rapture and afterlife and all that. Here's the thing. I'm at peace. I know who I am and where I'm going. I'm at peace, like, eternally. If somebody wanted to kill me, honestly, I'm okay with it. Like I said, there's nothing in this world that entices me anymore. There's nothing. I'm just here to oversee the peaceful transition of my dogs from this world into the next. After they're gone, I don't have a reason to be here for myself anymore. And when that's the case, I'm just going to be here as an instrument for God. I've known this even 8 years ago. I knew this was the case. I knew they were my responsibility, and I knew that after they were gone, that's when my work would begin. Because there'd be literally nothing left that I would have of value in this world. You really can't go all out or do anything until you have nothing left in the world. Until then, there's always going to be something kind of holding you back. Maybe that's why my little dog, who was younger, had to go. Maybe because I'm called to do something 5 years from now that if she was still alive, I'd still say, well, I still have to take care of my little dog. She's 14. She's not gone yet. But maybe something 3, 4, or 5 years from now, something happens and I'm supposed to do some stuff. Well, these two will probably not be there by then. And I will be in the clear to do it. Which means, in my opinion, this is just totally my opinion, and I don't think that anything too severe will happen in the world as long as these two dogs in front of you that you're seeing on this video, as long as they're still alive, I don't believe anything severe will happen. Once they're gone, all bets are off. And I say that because it was I believe this was just a personal kindness that God granted to me. I mean, he had to take the little one. She was too young. She would have been around too long. But I just asked just for a time. Maybe it was like a decade. Maybe, I don't know. Where it would just be me and the dogs. And I could just have just a little slice of heaven for just a little bit. Because I was told when I was younger who I am and what I do. And I am martyred. And I'll leave it at that. And I don't have any problems with that. Like I say, they'll be setting me home. It's I think the part I really have a difficulty with is knowing that I will have to still stay in this world and wander this world when all of my loved ones, or I should say when all of my close family, all of my dogs, my mom, when they're gone. It's like I'm just awkwardly stuck here, left behind. Left behind, but with a purpose. But again, where is your treasure? Because I know where my treasure is and will be when it comes to that time. See, that's another reason why I could never turn on God, because He's the one who keeps them. He's the one who remembers our time. He's the one who loved our time. He's the one who remembers. This is why no bad thing that can happen to me could ever cause me to turn against the person who is caring for my dogs, who is caring for my mom. I can't. It's insanely stupid. I am not so naive to think that God would want to do anything cruel like that. And I know who in this world is behind all of the death and destruction and illness. So it really doesn't matter what I lose. I know who keeps my loved ones. I know who watched over me during my life. And world events can't change my feeling about that spirit. I'm, of course, referring to God. For those who didn't figure it out. See, I remember for a long time, I always debated on what does it mean to love God? I mean, to me, that was just such a strange idea. I mean, it's hard enough it is just to even know who God is, right? Is he angry all the time? Is he jealous? Is he benevolent? You know, when you're young and you don't know who God is, it's hard enough just to even think who is God, let alone to say you love God. I mean, we use that word in the American language, love, for so many things. We use it from our spouse to our kids, to our tacos, to free time, days off. And I'm pretty sure things like days off rank higher than our spouse for most of us in terms of the magnitude of how we use the value love. So it's just a genetic word to say you feel strongly about something. You know, and then of course the measurement is very relative on a scale of 1 to 10, I guess you could say. So what does it mean to say that you love God? Because this is the greatest commandment. Jesus said to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. He said the second one is like it. Interesting how he said the second one is like it. That's probably a clue, right? It's like it. Which means the love of God is similar to the love that you would show people in your life. And what does that mean? How do you love other people in your life? When they go through hard times, you help them. When they need help, you help them. And sometimes, you know, for like lonely people, help is just listening to them. You just help. I mean, some of us are obviously gifted in some areas better than others. I know some of us would make for very, very terrible grief counselors. And others, like, everybody offers different kinds of help, but ultimately I think that's how you would show neighborly love is through action. Otherwise it's just all in your head. Otherwise there's literally nothing. There is no love. There's no love demonstrated, you know. So that's a little bit about how you love your neighbor. You help them. You help them. That's how you show love. And God feels that love when you show that love to your neighbor, by the way. He feels it and he remembers it. And that's a little bit more of treasure in heaven. But what does it mean then to love God? Well, God made you. Or I should say he made the world that made you. If you've accepted Jesus as your Lord, then that also means that God loves you. You can't necessarily say if God does or doesn't love anyone else, but you can say for sure that if you have accepted Jesus as your Lord, that he does love you. So let's see, he made you, he loves you, and he has good plans for you. So let me dissect something that maybe all of you could relate to. So when I say, I love my little dog who passed, why do I love her? I love her because she was a sweet little dog. I love her because she was kind. I love her because, I don't love her because she loved me, although that was nice too. It definitely reinforced it. Makes it easier when they love you. It's easy to love somebody who loves you, right? But it actually had nothing to do with whether or not they loved me or not. I mean, whether they came and licked my leg after dinner to say thank you or whether they never did it. I would love my dogs whether they showed it or not. And that's what's odd, as I just love them just because of them. I just love them. I love my little dog. Just the way she was. It's like she was made in a way that I would love her. And I wonder if that isn't true with the relationship between God and human. He just loves us. He loves us. We're silly. To him, maybe we're cute. We sometimes pee in the house or crap by the door and piss him off. Really piss him off sometimes. Sometimes we get in an altercation with one of the other dogs in the other yards. Piss him off, run up the vet bill. There's no real reason. I just love them. And it's not like I said, it's not anything they do for me. But, whether they show me love or not, I still love them anyway. So that should be a lesson to you in terms of how God loves his people. He just does. He just does. This experience, owning dogs, I always hated that word, having, that's better, I'll just try to say that from now on. Having dogs as family has taught me much about the relationship between God and human. They will never know how much I love them. I will. But in this time, in this life, they never will. They never will. I mean, they're just simple creatures. They do silly things all the time. And kind of like humans, I guess, maybe. But, so then how does a dog love a human? In that analogy, well, sometimes they come up and lick his leg. That's probably saying thank you, being grateful. It's probably one way. But grateful for what? Grateful for what? And the answer has to apply to everyone. It can't just be grateful for circumstances, because that's silly. Some people don't have good circumstances. It can't be also because of circumstances, because everything was set, past, present, and future. It was set. So what does that mean to be grateful? To be grateful maybe that we have a place in heaven. To be grateful that we have a hope to get us through this life. Which I guess would mean to be grateful that he is who he is. So I think that being grateful to God is one way. One way of showing God that you love him. Not ignoring God is probably another way. I mean, I would feel kind of sad if one of my dogs just decided they just didn't want to be around me and just hid from me. I'd be kind of sad about that. Like, why? Why? So I guess that's the opposite of loving God, is ignoring God, maybe. not wanting him in your day-to-day life is probably another opposite way of, yeah, I'm sitting here, I have a much easier time describing how you hate God. I'm just such a pessimist, I think, by nature, because I can always very easily think of how something is negative, but it's hard to think of it in a positive way. So I'm trying to think of a positive by thinking the opposite of a negative. Yeah, see, you can hate God if you just tell him to F off and go hide somewhere and don't ever talk to him. Like some dog would even do that, right? But I'm just saying, if using the analogy to try to shed light on how do you show God love, how do you love God, I'm trying to use the dog analogy to get there for answers that are understandable. So yeah, ignoring God would be one way of spending time with God, is one way of showing God that you love God. And what does that mean, to spend time? I mean, just some time, just in prayer, just in thoughts, just as you go throughout your day. And like I said before in another recording, prayer is mostly for the prayer. Oh wow, that sounded totally southern. Prayer is mostly for the prayer. For the one doing the praying is who is basically the primary beneficiary of prayer, but at the same time, I guess you can say God is also a beneficiary, because it is another way of showing God that you love him. Just a little bit of time with God. It's not hard. You're driving to work, you've got free time, just thinking about stuff. How about worrying less about the stuff going on in your life and spending a little bit more time trying to find out from God what it is, why this has to be the way it is. You know, what was the point of it? Sorry, I just started daydreaming. So the two things we talked about so far is spending time with God as a way of showing God love, being grateful, just being grateful for who he is and the promise you were given and the place that you know you have in heaven. So those two are pretty easy. I'm trying to think of, now Jesus said, and the other is like it. That's interesting. The other is like it. The other is like showing love to your neighbor. See, what, like I said, showing love to your neighbor is like helping your neighbor out. So how would you help God out? I know a lot of you are thinking, oh my gosh, he's talking about missionary trips across the country. No. No. Not everyone's called to that. Most people aren't. No, but think about this though. He did say that to love God, he said to love your neighbor is like loving God. So that would mean then spending some time with God is spending some time with your neighbor. That would mean that being grateful to God for your place in heaven and who he is. Well, I don't know if you can really be grateful. But I mean, if your neighbors are helpful, show thanks, be grateful. But I know there's some other stuff in the back of my mind that I'm just not getting out here in terms of how to love God. And for those of you who are listening, you're probably, if you know, you're probably just sitting there dying in agony, like, why is this guy so slow and coming in so slowly? Probably because this is improv. I'm just out here on the patio talking about life, thinking, and daydreaming, and trying to stay on the same subject because I'm becoming old and senile and I forget what I talked about even 5 minutes prior. So what is another way? I guess I'm going for at least 3, right? I'm sure there's 4 or 5, but I'm going for at least 3. What is another way that you could show God love? I'm thinking about some of the stuff Jesus said about the subject. Greater love, laying down your life is the greatest sign of love you can show a friend. I'm trying to think, what else did he say about love and all that? If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Oh, there's a good one. Okay. I can't believe it took this long to get to this. Okay, yeah. And it's very easy and obvious. So if you really love God and you love His Spirit and you love who He is, you wouldn't want to sin. You would have put your sinful nature to death, so to speak. You wouldn't want to. By not sinning, it's like a death to yourself. You're giving something up, carnal pleasure or something worldly gain. You're giving something up of yourself, okay? But you're doing it because it's sin, and this is actually one of the greatest ways to show God that you love Him. You keep His commandments, as He said. In the old days, in the Old Testament days, they would, it was always so brutal and disgusting, and I love animals, so I really hated this. They would sacrifice their most valuable animals as a sign of remorse for their sins. It is cruel and barbaric, no doubt. But the whole ritual, the whole point was basically to, like they say, I'm sorry. Well, Jewish culture is like, well, prove it. You say you're sorry, well, prove it. You always had to have a sacrifice in order to prove that you meant what you said. Always had to prove it. Couldn't just say it, you had to prove it. Actions, right? I mean, there's some logic to it. It makes sense that you would need to prove it. And so with Jesus, He's saying, you love me? Yeah. And leave your life of sin. That's how you show Jesus that you love Him. Probably more than anything. That you leave your life of sin. And I want to tell you right now, if you are struggling with sin, part of this is your will to leave sin, and the other part is God's timing. Okay? It wasn't until it was certain moments in my life that caused massive change for me to finally be able to do what I was not strong enough to do. Losing my little dog Faith was the final, that was it. Like I said, there's nothing in this world that could bring me to the same joy that I had with just my 3 dogs who are in good health, just living with them out here. There's nothing in this world that can do that. There's nothing. You can get me other dogs. You can get me the nicest house on the planet. It doesn't matter. It's not these dogs. It's not this time. It's not in this home. So there's nothing in this world, nothing, that could compare to that. And so that brought forth in me a massive life change. When they're here, when you're in good times, especially when they've been for so long, like 8 years, you take it for granted. You just think this is how it's going to be like the rest of your life. It's only going to get better. Even when you know they're going to die, you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking, well, it's going to be like this and a little bit better. But losing her definitely changed everything for me. I don't even know how to describe it. My view of the world, how I feel about everything, life, attachment, everything. It changed everything. And I was finally able to eliminate all sin from my life. All sin. And completely willingly too, not like out of obligation or burden or anything like that. out of love. So if you're stuck in sin, I just want you to know from my own personal experience, it might be a while, but there's going to be something probably that God uses in your life to change you in a way that will finally allow you to. I never, not even for a second, suspected it would have been my little dog. But it is the greatest act of love that you can show Jesus, that you can show Jesus, that you can show God, is to leave your life of sin. It's going to be a time when all of this passes away. Oh, the sadness will pass away. And you're going to see the brightness ahead of you. And you're going to feel God's presence. And you're going to feel the presence of everyone in heaven. And it will be perfect and it will all make sense. And those blessed passages talking about how the old order is past. He will wipe away every tear. It won't matter then because you'll already be there, but while you are here, it makes sense. My only concern after my dog left was I don't want to go back to my old ways. I don't want to go back to a life of sin, and temptation is just always lurking. I live out in the woods, I live just with my dogs. I live at home. But I do have an internet connection, so the whole world is literally at your fingertips, so there is that, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's usually temptation, usually for a guy, especially in his 20s or 30s, comes in the form of a female. It'll be at work. It'll be somewhere like that. And that's usually where the temptation will creep in. And that's why I don't want to go back to the world. I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to go back to anything like that. I want to stay out here. I want to stay in this state. I don't want to go back to the life of sin. I don't want to go back to Egypt. I don't want to go back to slavery, and I don't want to go back to sin. I don't want to go back to Sodom and Egypt. I just want to stay out here and stay clean until the Lord comes. That's all I want. But I know that, like I said earlier, after my dogs pass, I know that I am called. And I'll go where I know I need to go. But until then, it would be nice just to be able to stay out here. Just to be able to stay out here. That's just Jenna. She's She's just walking around smelling stuff. She's a leaking lady. She's had some issues keeping her urine in her. She's 13 and she's had a lot of health issues. Yes, she has. And I'm rooting for her. I really am. I'm rooting for at least 2 more years. For more reasons than one. I mean, not just for her and for me, for the world, really. Losing my little dog was a wake-up call, and I'm awake, and I'm listening. All I do now is listen to sermons of all the different speakers around the world, listening to what they're saying, listening to what the people are saying, just listening. That's all I'm doing right now is just listening. I remember the lady who had the experience with the angel who ended up giving me the message about who I am and all that. I remember she was talking about she had her only real question she had. Now, she didn't know that she was even giving the message to the guy she was supposed to. But her one main question was, why does there have to be so much hurt in this life? And at the time I was like 21, maybe 20. And so I hadn't really lived life long, and I didn't know about suffering. I hadn't even lost my mom yet. Didn't know anything about suffering, didn't know anything about hurt, didn't know what she was really talking about. And all I told her was, it won't be long. Referring to how it won't last forever. I don't know if that was a very good thing to say, or if it was the best thing to say, I don't know, but I think about that now, and I think it's amazing how this has become one of the biggest concerns that I have when it comes to talking to people, is about the suffering in this life. You know, the 20-year-old self of mine wouldn't have cared, but the almost 40-year-old self of mine understands this is one of the most important things to talk about. We love our loved ones, and for people who don't know what their fate is, it's well, I'm rambling. I'm just saying it's very hard for them. It's one of the biggest things on their mind. It's so pretty out here. I don't know how much of all of this forest noise you can hear, but I hear all of it. I hear the birds, I hear the bugs, I hear all of it. It's just so pretty out here. Hard to think that just not even 24 hours ago it was storming. Looked like the end of the world. And probably 24 to 48 hours from now it'll look like that again. And in about less than a year from now it'll be completely frozen over as a giant popsicle. Hard to believe all that